I'm Sakiko Fukuda-Parr. I'm professor of international affairs at the New School in New York. I want to speak about the fact that, we are here at the HLPF, the High Level Political Forum on the SDGs, and what the SDGs and the UN 2030 agenda says about that. Because the SDGs are known as a list of 17 goals and this sort of fat list of 169 targets and 232 indicators. But they should not be thought of as a one by one target. They do make a holistic whole, and every other sentence in the preface of the Agenda 2030 talks about integrated agenda that is indivisible, and that there are interlinkages, and that all sounds like this sort of peculiar abstract concept. But these terms have been repeated in just about every in every session of the HLPF that I've attended in the last week, and I think that is because you cannot think about sustainable development with a set of very small problems with a silver bullet solution, and that what you need is to have a process of development that is transformative. That's another promise of the agenda. And that recognizes, and that means that you have to recognize is that there are root causes of the problems of poverty, inequality, and environmental destruction that we see. And that these root causes are, in fact, interconnected. That's the reason. And I think the access to medicines targets in the SDGs is a wonderful example of why this is the case. You've got the target 3B. I've done my homework of looking through these 169 targets that speaks to both access and innovation. And you also have 3.8, I think it is, which is universal health coverage, which also specifically talks about access to medicines. And obviously, if you don't have those things, then your whole goal of health is going to be undermined. And if you don't health, then your whole productivity is going to be undermined. Your education agenda will be undermined. And so you can see this interconnected thing, and that something called sustainable development does not move just because you've got one pill, technology that'll move. I mean, there are these institutional and policy constraints that are interconnected. And so I think that the reason why you want to look at access to medicines and innovation issues in this holistic context is precisely because the policies that are shaping whether individuals do have access to medicines, whether the society is developing the kind of medicines that you need to tackle public health priorities, is related to the rest of the agenda, one of which is reduce inequality between people and within countries and between countries, another of which has to do with a whole set of means of implementation, about technology, about trade, and so forth. And the thing about policy coherence is that some aspects of trade policies, technology policies, may not be consistent with the objectives of reducing inequality within and between countries, of expanding access, of expanding innovation. I think the report is very important because the report updates the debate about access to medicines and innovation to the 21st century, to issues like AMR and TB. The 20th century discussion was very much targeted at diseases of the poor, neglected tropical diseases. We are now recognizing that the problem of access to medicines and innovation is a problem for everybody. And this is once again part of the Agenda 2030. Agenda 2030 is not only interconnected, but it is also a universal agenda. And so you have issues of TB and AMR, which are not problems of poor people not having enough money to buy the medicines. It's about not enough money being spent on innovation. And that innovation is something that is a global public good that has to be financed by everybody, all countries, all people, all stakeholders, if you like. And I think the report sort of rethinks that whole issue and say it's not just a matter of finding ways to deal with pricing of medicines, but that you have to go once again at the root cause of that, which has to do with the whole system for financing innovation and innovation that is based on the incentive of high prices and high volumes of sales. And that is obviously going to leave huge gaps of public priorities that don't create that kind of market opportunity for companies. And that's what you get. You've only had two new TB drugs in the last decades. And the companies are moving out of the the antibiotics business. So what we propose in our report is a whole series of delinkage models, alternative models to creating incentives for financing research and development. And I think what is more important for states is that if you create more publicly focused, public priority focused agenda for investing in research and development, then somebody has to create that agenda. What are the priorities? And so what we actually propose, for example, is that the states start working together on a special committee, a working group, as a sort of a precursor to developing principles and guidelines for setting priorities for investing public money, other incentive mechanisms like prizes for innovation. Well, I'm just an optimistic person, and I think that this is enough of a big problem that there will be a continuing discussion about this. And one of the most important things about the UN is to keep things on the agenda of international discussions and negotiations. And I think that's one of the reasons why the tactic of some of the people who have been opposed to some of these recommendations has been to try to stop discussion of the report. But the policy moves come from activism of civil society and of small governments. And, in a sense, it's the subaltern groups of small countries, civil society promoting the interests of poor people, poor countries, the excluded, and so forth. I think that's very alive. So I hope we can move forward on these recommendations.